It is a great pride that we present and publicly honor the lesser-known stories of the Japanese-American World War II experience. In doing so, help broaden the narrative of the struggles, sacrifice, determination, which are lessons of inspiration to many of us as Americans, especially in these current times. To make this all happen, we thought of champions, our honorees who trailblazed in this area to bring these stories to national and hopefully international attention. I'd like to turn this back over to Julie Small to present our first honorees.
Our first honorees are Campaign for Justice, Redress Now for Japanese Latin Americans, represented by Art Shibayama, a former internee and petitioner, and Grace Shimizu, its coordinator, and I would say driving force. Art Shibayama is one of 2,200 citizens and immigrant residents of Japanese ancestry from 13 Latin American countries whose civil rights and human rights were violated under the United States World War II enemy alien program. So for those of you who don't know, in the 1930s and 1940s, many immigrants living in the U.S. were identified as enemy aliens and placed on a secret government list called the Custodial Detention List. These included Germans, Italians, and Japanese immigrant residents. But that list was much broader and extended further all the way into Latin America. In Art's case, he was born in Peru to Japanese immigrants there. At age 13, he and his family were seized, rounded up, transported by U.S. armed guards over international borders. Passports were confiscated, and when they were met by INS immigration agents and asked for their papers, they were told they had entered the United States illegally, even though they had entered, they were brought here by force. Many of these families from Latin America were imprisoned in Crystal City, Texas internment camp. These were different than the 10 War Relocation Authority camps we all know about, well, hopefully we know about by now. Manzanar and Topaz and Tule Lake, those camps, these were run by immigration. Little did they know that these stateless enemy aliens would actually become, they were actually used as hostages, as barter, to be traded for U.S. citizens being held by Japan. And during the war, that happened twice. There were prisoner exchanges. And when you think about, these were people, civilians brought from a country that the United States was not at war with. So that was a particular violation. And they were rendered stateless. Among the people that were actually, sorry, I just wanted to make sure that Art's grandparents were among the people that were sent to Japan during the war. So thrust into a war zone from a friendly nation, and Art never saw them again. At the end of the war, the remaining Japanese Latin Americans, they were still in the camp in Texas, and they decided, many were deported to Japan at the end of the war, but there were a group of people that said, no, we don't want to go to Japan, we want to go home. We want to go back to Peru, and Art's family was among them. They were actually in the camps 2 years beyond the end of the war, and they were finally freed. They helped fight a San Francisco attorney with the ACLU of Northern California named Wayne Collins, whose son was honored here a couple of years ago. He helped stop them from being deported and also got them paroled out of the camps. Later, they were able to, many of these internees that stayed in the U.S. were able to remain here as permanent resident aliens, and many became U.S. citizens. Mr. Shibayama has been seeking apology and redress from the U.S. government for nearly 3 decades. Japanese Latin Americans were not included in the original redress legislation, the Civil Liberties Act, that provided reparations and an apology to Japanese Americans and who had been interned and otherwise relocated and during the war. So that was part of that's what Campaign for Justice did, was to try to get them included in that legislation and to try to bring some kind of acknowledgement and redress for what had happened. The settlement that was finally reached was not adequate in some people's eyes, including Art and his brothers. It was an apology from the president and a small payment, but Art decided to press on. He opted out of that settlement, and he went ahead, and in 2003 he filed a petition with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to ask for a hearing on the U.S. government's failure to provide redress for war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated against them as children during the war. On March 21st of this year, nearly 14 years after asking for that, the hearing was held at the Commission in Washington, D.C., and Art is awaiting its ruling. Art has been a tireless advocate, and his perseverance over the decades inspires our continued activism to seek justice and due process during times of war. By his side and conducting the important advocacy and education work is Grace Shimizu. Her father was a Japanese immigrant resident in Peru who also survived a rendition of Japanese Latin Americans. And through her organizing work and research, she also uncovered and made public the hidden history of what happened in Peru during World War II, and the fact that the Peruvian government had cooperated with the U.S. government and seized over 6,000 men, women, and children, not just of Japanese ancestry, but also German and Italian and Jewish ancestry, and brought them to the U.S. And through Grace's work as director of the Japanese Peruvian Oral History Project, she's really informed the public about these experiences through discussion projects and also the development of a digital museum project called Uncovering Hidden History, the World War II Internment of Japanese Latin Americans, in partnership with National Japanese American Historical Society. She's assisting with the digitization of the Japanese Peruvian oral histories that she's been gathering and her organization has been gathering. And they're also developing a curriculum together about these different set of camps run by the Department of Justice and Immigration. Ms. Shimizu's work underscores our need to be ever vigilant of our civil liberties and human rights today. Together we honor Art Shibayama and Grace Shimizu for their continued dedication to education for the public, their immeasurable persistence in seeking justice for Japanese Latin Americans. I want to thank you, Art and Grace. First, we'll hear from Art.